ഹിന്ദു ആവാം, അതാണ് സർക്കാരിന് ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് സ്വീകരിക്കാം. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചതുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നിയമപരമായതും ഭരണഘടനാപരവുമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യണമെന്നുള്ള കാര്യം ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഗവൺമെൻറ് ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഗവർണറെ ചാൻസലർ സ്ഥാനത്ത് കേരള ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ നിയമത്തിൻ്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടാണിത് യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ അധികാരം കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. ആ അധികാരം നൽകേണ്ടതുണ്ടോ എന്ന കാര്യം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യേണ്ടുന്ന അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് കാര്യങ്ങൾ വന്ന് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് നമുക്ക് സ്വീകരിക്കേണ്ടി വരും.
Okay, my colleague Neetu is with us right now to bring us more context. Neetu, we played out for our audiences a few minutes ago a governor's response to the media. And just seeing his anger, that kind of anger from a government official seems unprecedented. Could you bring us more context as to what's brought him to this point? What is the context to this story? And then tell us what we have to look forward to today, please.
See, the governor was quite angry today, saying that he will not speak to two regional media channels, two Malayalam channels, Kairali News and Kairali TV and Media One. He says that they are running a propaganda against them and they are comrades riding media persons, and so that is a response that we saw from Kochi.
Back on the Nation at 5 with the CNN News 18 exclusive on the firestorm in Pakistan over the alleged assassination attempt at Imran Khan. Imran Khan has asked President Alvi to act now, that quote-unquote, lead an inquiry to identify the guilty and hold them accountable. CNN News 18 has accessed a letter that's been written to the Pakistan president by Imran Khan. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us these details. In the letter to the president, Imran Khan has stated that since the removal of the PTI government, the country has been confronted with an ever-increasing scale of false allegations, harassment, arrests and custodial torture. He has alleged that the Interior Minister Rana Salaullah repeatedly issued death threats to him, and that he was informed of an assassination plot hatched by Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah and a senior ministry official. So after there was a face-off with the Punjab Chief Minister Parvez Alai, who refused to write these three names in the FIR, Imran Khan writing to the Pak president saying, you launch the inquiry and get to the bottom of it. Even as the Pakistan courts have said that there needs to be a thorough inquiry and they should look into the entire matter because it is a massive security breach, assassination attempt or not, if you were to, depending upon which side of the political spectrum you want to listen to. But big development this. Abhishek Jha with us with a quick update. Abhishek, so Imran Khan writing this letter to the president, so the PTI wanting to milk this politically to the fullest.
Of course, and this is not that the Pakistan government is not conducting any inquiry. In fact, Supreme Court of Pakistan has also said for this inquiry. But Imran Khan is insisting on the way that he wants this inquiry commission to go about. He has insisted that the name of Shahbaz Sharif and all other Rana Sanaullah Khan and Faisal Aziz, these should also be included in this the fire. And he has alleged that they have been hatching a plot to kill him way before the actual assassination attempt on his life has happened.
Right. Right. Thank you for your inputs, Abhishek. With that, it's a wrap of this edition of The Nation at 5. Zakir ready with Viewpoint. Stay with us.
Good evening, this is Viewpoint. I'm Zakir Jacob. There were dramatic scenes over the weekend in Brampton, Canada, where Hindu activists gear out the mayor of the city for his openly anti-Hindu and anti-India comments. They also have another peeve with him that there are these posters across the city falsely accusing Hindu groups of killing sick infants. Remember, this is also on the back of a second referendum that happened in Canada for a free Khalistan. How can Canada openly allow such blatant anti-India activity to happen on its soil? Does this not go against the UN Charter, where open refuge is being given to activities that target another sovereign state? What can and what should India do? That's what we'll take up on Viewpoint. But first, the story of what was a dramatic weekend in Canada.
That's the mayor of a Canadian city called Brampton.
He's our honorable guest.
He's being heckled in a temple by members of the Hindu community. Why? Because banners have been put up across the city with the text, "Sikh infants burnt alive by Hindu mobs." When questioned about it, the mayor refused to condemn the posters. In another Canadian city, Mississauga, more than 75,000 Canadian Sikhs voted in a referendum seeking secession of Punjab from India to create a Khalistan state. This is the second pro-Khalistan referendum in Canada in less than 2 months, despite the Indian government's strong objection.
Our position on the efforts by anti-Indian elements to hold a so-called Khalistan referendum is well known. It has been conveyed to the Canadian government both in New Delhi and in Canada.
On Diwali Day in Mississauga, hundreds of pro-Khalistan supporters clashed with Hindu groups. They held banners and raised slogans supporting the Khalistan referendum movement. Canada's High Commissioner to India says his country does not support or recognize these Khalistani referendums. Yet, the Trudeau government doesn't appear to be making any attempt to shut them down. So why is Canada giving a platform to anti-India hate?
Why is Canada allowing this kind of platform, allowing its soil for such anti-India hate? And what is it that the government of India can and should do? Vishnu Prakash is former diplomat. He's joining us on the broadcast this evening. Sushant Sareen, senior fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. Manjinder Singh Sirsa is spokesperson of the BJP. Lord Rami Ranger will be joining us as the chairman of the British Sikh Association. Let me start with Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, because all of this is happening in Canada on a foreign country's soil. This is openly anti-India activity. Why should India turn around and not do anything about it? Yes, diplomatic representations have been made both in Ottawa as well as here in Delhi, but it doesn't seem like this is ending anytime soon.
Greetings, Jacob. First of all, the facts. The fact is that the Trudeau government is pandering to vote bank politics. It's cynical politics. And of late, because they are a minority government and they have this need the support of NDP, which is led by Jagmeet Singh, who is a pro-Khalistani politician, they have become quite blatant about the whole thing. Now, we have time and again been taking up the matter. We have been taking up the matter quite forcefully. There are two aspects to it. One, the India-Canada relationship is much bigger than the present, let's say, the tenure of this government. Trudeau government has been particularly, if not supportive, they have been turning a Nelson's eye to the Khalistani activities. So that is one. We have to ensure that the relationship, to the extent is possible, is protected. Also, I think we have been telling them clearly, privately, that this is not acceptable, that this is bound to impact the relationship. And I guess if this continues, we'll have to look at other ways and means to let our views and let the world know what Canada is doing, because what they are doing is clearly against international norms, against it's against what any friendly country will do for another country.
Absolutely. I mean, just because the Canadian government has whatever its political compulsions are, whatever its vote bank politics are, fact is that you cannot be seen giving this kind of open platform to a blatant anti-India abuse. Let me ask Manjinder Singh Sirsa, tomorrow if India were to hold a referendum, let's say on Quebec, and should Quebec separate from Canada, would the Canadian High Commission or the Canadian government take it lightly? If that's the case, then why should India take such open Khalistan annexation that's being called for through these SFJ and other fellows, the referendums that are happening? And this is happening on government premises, both the referendum that happened in September and the one that happened over the weekend. This is Canadian government-owned property where this so-called referendum is happening.
No, very true, Jacob. It is not that government of India is not taking it up seriously. Time and again, government of India has taken up this issue with the Canadian government. My voice is a bit echoing. I think you're getting me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go on. We can hear you.
So, Jaka, it is time and again Indian government has been taking up this issue, but in spite of that, the Canadian government has been soft on those kind of people who are trying to influence the people sitting here in India. Their mission is that if they could be able to divide this country, which is impossible, I must say. And shockingly, all those people are funded by none other than a Pakistani ISI, which otherwise is known for its nefarious designs, and due to this, which American government has also had taken it very seriously against Pakistan. But I'm shocked to see this, that Canadian government, in spite of all this, even seeing what happened in their neighboring country, what happened on 9/11, how these things transpired there in America, and those were all generated from Pakistan itself. And these agitations, these referendums are paid by none other than ISI in Pakistan. But in spite of that, Canadian government is not taking them seriously. And you must have seen in last couple of months there have been killings. 2 people have been killed. One of them, very renowned Sikh there, Mr. Malik, who was assassinated. And then it came to know that the reason for his assassination was that the people, hardliners sitting there, were not happy with his activities, and so they decided to kill him. So
but Sirsa Saab, you know this free Khalistan business, which you're right,
in spite of all this.
Sirsa Saab, you're right that ISI is funding this and so on, but you know, ISI in Pakistan is a $350 billion economy. We are a almost $3 trillion economy. Are you saying that, and forget about, you know, what it's doing in Pakistan, what it's trying to do in Kashmir, but in a third country, in a so-called Western liberal democracy, we can't outmatch or outshine the influence that ISI has on some groups in Canada. Surely India is a much bigger player in the global stage, that it should be taken seriously.
No, the thing is, as the former diplomat Mr. Vishnu very clearly stated, that the reason right now is, Vishnu Prakashji said, that the government is a minority government there, supported by the people who are supporters of these hardliners, or who have been in a power, just reason being because those hardliners have been supporting them with the financial power also and with the voting power also. And now they are repaying them by doing this. But the biggest challenge here is, it is not that Indian government hasn't taken it, has taken it very seriously, not once, twice, but in fact, when the Canadian Prime Minister was here in India, it was apprised him in a length breadth that what is going in Canada and how it will hamper your peace and prosperity there in Canada also. And now he's also facing all these kind of problems there. And in the coming days, these things will get worse. I must tell, today, they might see कि ये तो वहाँ हो रहा है because it is hindering in India, and they might be enjoying. But days are not far away when they have to taste this medicine also, and very soon. And in fact, they have been. If you see about these killings in Canada, it is the outcome of all those, because they have been soft on those people, and now they are facing these consequences also.
No, so let me ask Sushant Sareen, this is where, you know, I believe diplomatic heft, and let's not mince any words here. This is where hard power needs to come to bear. I mean, imagine if such a thing, instead of free Khalistan, if a bunch of Tibetans were to do this in Canada, saying free Tibet, and 100,000 people voted, you think China would have taken it lying low? There would have been an economic, diplomatic boycott of Canada by now.
Zaka, that's correct. But the thing is, I think we must look inwards. I agree with both my colleagues when they talk about vote bank politics and the peculiarities of Canadian politics. And I also think that the Canadians, even including the High Commissioner, are being rather disingenuous when they say that, you know, this is freedom of expression and we cannot stop this. This is the right to, political freedoms in Canada. Would they give a similar right to, for example, the Islamists who backed for the ISIS or the Al-Qaeda? Yeah. Would they allow them to hold these kind of rallies publicly and openly and call for, all kinds of violence in India? I don't think that would be allowed. So clearly the Canadians have their red lines, and this is not one of their red lines. Now, the problem, however, Zaka, is that we need to look inside. What have we done? We have lifted all the blacklists. We had blacklisted many of these Khalistanis. From my colleagues in Canada, what I get to hear is that very often politicians in Punjab recommend the cases of known Khalistanis, and they are given visas to come to India. The Canadians, when we remonstrate with the Canadians say that, look, you've allowed Khalistanis to come to India. Your politicians and your people are garlanding them, and you expect us to take action against them. So what have we done about it? We have done in the Khalistani movement case, we have done what we have done in Kashmir. That all these despicable element, we have put them on our head. We have treated them with kid gloves. We have tried to give them concessions. And the guys who root for India, who hold the Indian flag aloft, who bat for India, we make them stand in long queues. We give them the treatment which babus give to normal people. So I think we need to look inside. What is the preventing this government from monitoring who are the people who have voted, for example, in this referendum, blacklisting each one of them, not only them, all their families. You know, Zaka, the travesty of this whole thing, people go from Punjab as illegal immigrants. Then out there, they apply for asylum and refuge. They are given that, they then get permanent residency or citizenship of Canada, and then we give those guys visas to come to India. Now, these are persecuted people, apparently, who run away from India, and everybody knows there's no persecution in India. These guys run away from India using that pretext, and then give them visas to come back to India. What is preventing the government of India and all this nonsense which is, said the government is doing everything? What is the government doing? Please tell me. What is the punitive measures you have taken against these people? Have you seized their properties? Have you auctioned their properties? Have you taken action against them? Have you stopped their visas? Have you stopped their travel? What have you done? Please tell me in concrete terms.
No,
don't give me these stories.
I think one of the points that Sushant made is absolutely well taken. I think it's a well-known, publicly available fact as to who these 75,000 people or 100,000 people who voted in these referenda are. Surely they would want to come back to India to meet family. Why are they being given visas? Surely they'll be sending money and remittances to their families back in India. Why should India accept money from people who don't want to be part of India, who want to, have this notion of Khalistan? But I also want to get Lord Rami Ranger into this conversation because it's not just in Canada. This happened last year in the UK as well, where again there was this so-called referendum on Free Khalistan organized by an outlawed group here in India, the SFJ. Again, 100,000 people participated in that. In fact, the previous Indian High Commissioner to London was not even allowed to enter certain gurdwaras in London because it had become this hot den of Free Khalistan. I mean, the point is, you want to be part of India and you want to do all of this anti-India activities on foreign soil, and none of those governments seem to be able to do a damn thing about it.
I think what these guys are doing, they are damaging the respect and the legacy of Sikh gurus for India. They are diminishing their respect because Sikh guru belong to the world, they belong to India, and they want to claim Sikh gurus for a handful of Khalistani terrorists. So therefore, they are, is ghar ko aag lag gayi, is ghar ke chirag se, where people are revering and respecting Sikh gurus, and they want to link Sikh gurus to themselves and diminishing their respect. Number two, there should be a law of sedition used vigorously and robustly against those people, especially starting with Pannu, because we have been impotent to bring Pannu to justice, and therefore Pannu has given a lot more encouragement to all these guys. As your panelists first said, the most of these guys deliberately become anti-India to seek asylum. Number three, India is a very, very strong democracy, largest democracy in the world. We should never ever take any reaction in panic. Let them do whatever they want to do. India is strong enough to withstand these little irritation. But what we need to do is to have a law that if anyone, if we have video cameras, we have pictures, anyone seen agitating against Mother India will be tried for sedition the minute he lands in India. Number three, Canadian government should know from Pakistan experience, Pakistani harbor terrorists, and they turned on Pakistan. So these guys, they are becoming unproductive citizens of Canada. They're disloyal to their own country. How are they going to be loyal to Canada? So they should learn, they should dismiss them, and they should contain them. Otherwise, they will damage Canada more than they will damage India because they are not in India.
No, one of the points that Lord Ranger made is, I think, very, very valid. This guy, Gurpatan Singh Pannu, Sirsa Saab, India had written to the Interpol saying, act against this guy. Obviously, he doesn't live in India, he lives abroad. And Interpol wrote back saying, oh, no, you can't act against him. And within a couple of months of that, India hosts a World Conference of Interpol. again, I come back to that question. If we are such a diplomatic power and an economic power, we are hosting Interpol conferences, then surely we can get the Interpol to act against Pannu.
I agree. This
Sir,
is the reason.
Mr. Sirsa, Mr. Sirsa, thank you.
We should actually, we have never
That question is to Mr. Sirsa, thank you.
We have never asked.
So he's a very smart, Jaka is a very smart guy. You know, when he talks about India or when he talks about the anti-India statements, he has a very calculated statements written by his advocates. So he is very clearly states up the points also, and also sees that he's never catch up in this in his language. So that was the reason when we take up this issue with Interpol and also with the American government also and the Canadian government also, they said that whatever he is using the language is not as a terrorist, it can't be counted as a terrorist activity. But otherwise, the reality is that he is the one who is the contention of bone in this case. He is the one who has been funding. Yesterday announced 10 lakh rupees for the person who has assassinated in Amritsar. So the thing is, he is the man. But yes, surely because he is smart enough to use his language in a very calculated words through appropriate legal format, we are unable to tap in through Interpol. But I am sure about the Indian government. So there are many things which I cannot disclose on channel, but I knew that what government is doing and what government is supposed to do, and we are sure that you will see in the coming days. But one thing I must clearly say here. See, we shouldn't give them so much of importance. I knew they have nothing to say, they have nothing to do. As far the Indians are concerned, there is no as such idea that they can float in our minds, but they want that they should be on a national channels here in India, and by some default we are also showing them, but doesn't make a difference. Tell them whatever they want to do, they can do in Canada, but on this pious India, they cannot do a single thing. They won't be able, and they will never be able to achieve their agenda.
People like Dawood Ibrahim and others, of course, India has been pursuing this matter for a number of years. But I want to know from Vishnu Prakash, here is a terrorist, an outlawed individual from an outlawed organization, openly saying that he will give 10 lakh rupees to the person who indulged in a daylight murder in Amritsar last week. Is that not a crime? Is that not incitement to violence? Surely, wherever he is, UK or Canada, isn't it incumbent on the government there to act against a man who is openly inciting violence, calling for violence?
Zaka, you know and I know that one man's terrorist is, and the other person may look at him differently. The terrorists are being protected by China, are being protected by other countries. There is a lot of politics involved. You know it as well as I do. But let me clarify a few things. I think what we are discussing is slightly different from reality. You know, we have, as I know for first hand, because I was High Commissioner to India and Canada.
Correct.
You know, the visas were given to only those people who were contrite. They were on blacklist for 30 years. What purpose was it serving? So it is not that the government one day said that everything is forgiven and forgotten. It has been very selective. It has been carefully done. And how can we say that those who are still misbehaving or pursuing a nefarious agenda are being let off the hook? They are not. But the world does not go by our desires. I mean, we have to pursue that. We have to continue pressing each and every player, and we have to stay the course. It's not easy. I mean, the Comprehensive Convention of International Terrorism, the draft was presented in '96. So, you know, there is a lot of politics involved, and it's very easy to say that we should do this and do that. I think one has to make haste slowly. Steps have to be taken because in an incremental fashion, we have never. By the way, the Khalistani movement, which was so strong in the 80s and 90s, is shadow of itself. So it is not that we went all guns blazing and it happened, because there is a fatigue with terror activities or separatist activities. It is a phase, and this phase is being handled very maturely and carefully. As far as funding is concerned, let me also clarify here that most of the funding is coming from within, because the separatists, they control the gurudwaras, and the Sikhs who are pious people, they do not know that where the money is going, and this money is, they donate to gurudwaras, and the money is taken away by the Khalistani separatists who are controlling the Gurudwaras. So
Okay.
that is where the funding is coming from, most of the funding.
So Shant, you want to respond to what Ambassador Prakash said?
Yeah, it's one of those very few occasions on which I have some disagreements with what Ambassador Prakash said. I'll make 3 or 4 quick points. Number one, towards something which Mr. Sirsa said. You can't, Zaka, I think you're doing human service by talking about this, because you can't shut your eyes to something which is happening in front of you and expect that it will not happen just because you've shut your eyes. So yes, please expose what is happening, and that is important to put pressure on government to move. Number one. Number two, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash says that, blacklists were there for 30 years and this is a movement is a shadow of itself. One of the reasons why this movement, apart from the way the Punjab police led by Mr. KPS Gill wiped out terrorism in Punjab, I think these blacklists and the kind of punitive measures which the government of India took in the past did have some impact. I don't know how much, it's difficult to quantify, but it did have. And please look at the correlation. The moment this blacklists go, the moment some of these jokers have been, given visas, they've been allowed to come in a spirit of reconciliation. I don't see how you reconcile with terrorists. You see the steady rise of this Khalistani movement again. To say it is a shadow of what it was in the 80s and early 90s is perhaps true. But that shadow is looming large every day. And we are seeing incidents of terrorism rising on a daily basis. What we need is zero tolerance, which means you scrap all visas. No visas will be given without proper vetting, number one. You scrap all these PIO and OIC cards for these characters. Scrap them across the board and reissue them after having duly verified these people, and do it for the families. Don't do it for individuals. Do it for entire families.
All right.
Number three, please have a hawk eye on any monies coming into Punjab from these sources. Number four, please remember one thing, that it is exceedingly important. It is not good enough to write a letter to Interpol and say that, this Pannu fellow is a terrorist. Yes, he is. But you have to build, Zaka, a proper case. You have to make a compelling case that the speeches, the monies, and the acts of terrorism taking place out here. Forget Interpol. Can you not make a proper case like this with the Canadian government or the British government?
Sure.
With the British, it's going to be even tougher, because the British have this habit of playing, these games with India all the time. But perhaps it might be a little easier with the Canadians. But you have to build a compelling case. And then there have to be diplomatic repercussions in case this does not happen. To say that it's not as easy as it seems is perhaps correct. But just because it's not as easy as it seems does not mean that we do not take the tough.
Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I want to thank all our guests. Like I said, the point of this program is to show what is happening in another country, open and blatant anti-India activity against another sovereign country. And I'm very clear in my mind that even violates the basic UN Charter. So if the government of India needs to make a case, it surely should start from there. But let's see how this story plays out. I want to move on to some domestic political news, where the hangama over the Delhi excise policy scam seems to have now taken a fresh twist. Businessman Dinesh Arora, who's been accused in the scam, has moved to CBI court today, seeking pardon without any coercion. Arora says that he wants to become a witness and he's ready to disclose all the facts related to the case. Just a few days ago, the same court had granted anticipatory bail to Dinesh Arora after the CBI did not oppose his bail plea. The Delhi court will now hear the application seeking pardon on the 14th of November. Arora is believed to be a close aide of Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia, and also somebody who benefited in a big way from the new liquor policy. Let me now go across to Ananya. What may Dinesh Arora turning approver or turning witness in this case, what may this legally mean for Manish Sisodia?
Definitely, Zaka, this is a big development that has taken place in the Liquorgate scandal, and we shall remember that if Dinesh Arora turns an approver into this particular case, because he was a beneficiary of this particular scheme, he was well aware of all the context and the contentions of this particular scheme, he might spill a lot of beans. Secondly, when he will turn an approver into this case, his status would change from an accused to a witness, and his statements would actually hold more value. and more credibility. Now, thirdly, he would have a lot of revelations to make, and that's the reason why, in fact, the CBI would also have agreed that he be turning an approver into this particular case, and that's the reason why the Central Bureau of Investigation had moved an application seeking to turn him into an approver. But at this point of time, if at all the court allows for him to become an approver into this particular case, a lot of troubles might be mounting for the Aam Aadmi Party, because remember that the day anticipatory bail plea was filed by Dinesh Arora into this particular case, the very same day, in fact, Vijay Nair was arrested by the Central Bureau of Investigation into this particular case, and particularly the Central Bureau of Investigation had not opposed the bail application that was filed by Dinesh Arora, anticipatory bail application, in fact, saying that he was cooperative in this current probe, and that's the reason why he is now sought for pardon and has said that he wants to turn an approver into this particular case and would cooperate in that particular probe.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Ananya Bhatnagar there with details of this possibility that Dinesh Arora could turn approver. The court is yet to take a call on that. Meanwhile, there was an anti-hijab protest that took place in Kerala over the weekend. The protest was organized by the Kozhikode Islamic free thinkers in front of the town hall in Kozhikode city. During their annual seminar this year, women burnt the hijab in solidarity with the Iranian women who've been protesting since September, when 22-year-old Masha Amini was reportedly beaten in custody by Iran's morality police for wearing the hijab improperly. She later succumbed to her injuries. Post this, massive protests have been taking place in Iran, where locals are demanding the quashing of the morality police. Neetu now joins us live. So the question that's being asked is, if they are doing this in solidarity with the protesters who've been arrested and against whom action has been taken in Iran, what is the position about women who are wearing hijab in India, including in places like Kozhikode, where this matter, of course, is also pending before the Supreme Court, whether or not a dress code should be followed in educational institutions? Do these women who protested have to say anything about that?
See, Saka, this is a protest that was organized by the Kerala Yuktivadi Sangam, which is a rationalist association. So every year they have this free thinking seminars that they organize. And yesterday at the Kozhikode Town Hall, as part of their annual seminar, they said this issue was burning at this moment. It was timely. That is why they decided to have this protest against in solidarity with what is happening in Iran. But this was a protest that was organized by the Yuktivadi Sangam, which are the rationalists.
All right, Neetu, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story plays out. The bigger question also is to political parties in Kerala, including the likes of the Indian Union Muslim League, as to what their position is as far as hijab is concerned. That's a wrap. In a moment, Anusha joining you with the biggest exclusive.
Good evening, hello and welcome to the special broadcast. I'm Anusha Soni. The Supreme Court of India has handed down a historic verdict, upholding the 103rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. The Constitution bench, by a majority of 3:2, laid down that the economic status can be the criteria for reservation in India. Also, the 50% ceiling in overall reservations prescribed by the Indira Sahni or the Mandal Commission case can be breached, provided that the government has created a new class in itself, like in this case, economic reservation 10%. Well, that's the ratio that emerges from this historic judgment. It is indeed a watershed moment. But here's moving to the implication bit. While the Antyodaya mission of the present government means creation of a more egalitarian society, devoid of caste lines, but has this opened up a Pandora's box? If the government can create a new class and reserve 10%, can further classes be created? In the words of Justice Pardiwala, remembering the vision of Baba Bhimrao Ambedkar, reservation cannot be a permanent feature of Indian Constitution. Today's judgment does not touch upon the reservation for SC, STs and OBC, but by allowing reservation based on economic status, clearly new dynamics, new paradigms have been opened up on this already very vexed issue of reservations in India. Our top focus this hour.
माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कहना है कि ये जो EWS कैटेगरी है, ये कहीं से भी जो कास्ट बेस्ड रिजर्वेशन है उसको कॉन्फ्लिक्ट नहीं करता, ये किसी भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का वायलेशन नहीं करता, आर्टिकल 14 का वायलेशन नहीं करता।
I don't oppose EWS reservation. I definitely oppose the mindset of the Supreme Court. Isn't it the mindset of the Supreme Court that the biased mindset?
Well, there are some judgments that come from the top court of the country that are a watershed moment. This one is indeed one of them because it upholds a change in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. A pro-poor quota has been upheld. And what does it mean when you give reservation based on economic status? Many would say this facet was not known to Indian Constitution, at least in the basic structure or in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Quota on the basis of one's economic status is good in law. It's not violative of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. Quota for economically weaker section doesn't violate the Constitution. It is in line with various judgments and the Constitution bench judgments of the Supreme Court. Centre can create a new class for reservation. The central government said, Indra Sani, 50% ceiling only for SC, ST, OBC. 3 classes. This is a new class that we are creating. We have the power to do that. Vindication for the affirmative action based on economic status. This is a positive step that the government has taken. It has not taken away the rights and privileges of any particular community. 50% ceiling limit can be breached in exceptional situation. What are those exceptional situations? Like one where the court has said that the government has the power to create a new class. What are the criticisms? There are criticism coming in. None other than the Chief Justice of India and Justice Ravindra Bhatt have dissented. But various political voices coming in. Undermines the fabric of social justice. The entire argument that reservation is about, in some way addressing the historical injustices. It's about caste and a homogeneous group. It is not about the economic status. Discriminatory, excludes the communities historically sidelined. SC, ST, OBC will not be covered under 103rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, the new parts introduced in 16 and 17. Stated purpose of quotas to enable representation, not financial upliftment. This is a very important point that one needs to understand, and it coincides with deprivation versus discrimination issue. When the constitution makers had gotten reservation in our country, the entire idea was to give the underprivileged communities some kind of say on the table, a seat on the table, so that they can be represented. One of the arguments that the petitioners had advanced were that reservation is not tool for any kind of financial upliftment, and if the government wants to do it, use your welfare schemes. But the majority disagreed. And joining us on the broadcast is our legal correspondent Ananya Bhatnagar, who is with us on the show. Ananya, very interestingly, even the judges who upheld the 103rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution said that reservation is not a permanent feature. And we must think about the times when we can fulfill the vision of Dr. Ambedkar, and reservation at some point perhaps can be done away with.
Well, definitely, Anusha, it's the view that's been given out by both the dissenting judges and also the concurring judges, clearly saying that reservation is no permanent solution and it was never there for, in fact, an indefinite time to be there. And that's the reason why, in fact, Justice Bela Trivedi in her piece of judgment clearly says that even after 75 years of independence, we shall actually relook into this particular structure of system, while on the other hand we hear from Justice Ravindra Bhatt and Justice, in fact, the Chief Justice of India, UU Lalit, about how the exclusion of, in fact, the economically weaker section, the SC, STs and OBC, the economically the backward classes would actually result into the disruption of the social fabric of the country. But at the same time, the concurring judges actually say that reservation is not something, though it's a very important provision for the Constitution of India. It's an affirmative action under the Constitution of India, but then it is not such an affirmative action which is not actually inflexible or cannot be modulated with it. But it is something that has to be looked into with the changing times, and in fact that's the reason why two of the judges, Justice Bela Trivedi and Justice Dinesh Maheshwari, Justice J.B. Padiwala, clearly go on to say that a reservation system shall be re-looked into, at least after 75 years of independence, when almost 7 decades have passed in. And remember that when, in fact, then Attorney General Mr. K.K. Venugopal was arguing this particular case, he was representing the central government. He had said that the point of equality that the petitioners are claiming with the economically weaker sections of the general category is not something to be correct, because already the SC, STs, the OBCs who are backward classes have already had those loads of benefits in the form of reservation
and in no way, Ananya, as the Attorney General also pointed out, those benefits are being touched by the government, and that's the written order copy also that my colleague Ananya was elucidating upon. That that's what the court has said, that the entire idea of reservation is not so basic or intrinsic to the constitution that it cannot be further evolved. That's the idea that the court has mooted upon. Thank you, Ananya, for joining us on the broadcast and getting us all the details on that very important story. What are the implications of this judgment? Politically, how will it translate? What kind of ways and methods does it open to various state governments? How will this really be implemented on the ground? These are all the questions that need to be addressed in the times to come. Joining us on the broadcast is our special newsmaker, Ashwini Kumar, who is the former law minister, is joining us on the show today. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to us. My first question to you is, you must have seen the judgment, the historic judgment that has come in from the Supreme Court. How will this judgment impact the politics around the entire issue of reservation, which has largely been an issue about caste identity and communal identities?
Look, reservation has been a vexed constitutional and political issue for a very long time. And it has been a subject matter of intense debate in the country. I don't think that this judgment is the end of that debate. This judgment will only carry the debate forward. But for the moment, I believe, both as a lawyer, as a political person, as a citizen of this country, that constitutionally speaking from the perspective of social and economic justice, this majority judgment upholding the 103rd constitutional amendment, giving reservations of 10% to the economically weaker sections, is a welcome development. It is a landmark judgment. It is, in fact, a watershed moment in the evolution of India's egalitarian democracy. My considered view, and as objective as one can be, is that the Supreme Court has recognized the principle that economic backwardness or economic disability is the worst disabler. And therefore, the benefit of the state's affirmative action should not be limited only to those who are disadvantaged on account of caste and historical injustices, but also those who, by virtue of their economic condition, are denied the full benefits of equal citizenship. I think on all matters of principle and on constitutional fundamentals, the judgment is valid and needs to be welcomed by all Indians.
Indeed, a watershed moment. I agree with you there. Will this open up a Pandora's box? Now the position is that the ceiling of Indra Sani, 50% is applied only in SC, ST, OBC. That is how you count. And the government has created a new class so they can bypass this. Nothing stops any government from creating further classes. How do you see that?
Well, you have a point, but the fact is that the government has given a reasonable classification or a reasonable basis for making the distinction and saying that 50% reservation was for the SC/STs, but others need also to be receiving the benefit of the state's affirmative action. And therefore, by a constitution amendment, not by the sleight of hand, but by the constitution amendment, which was passed by both houses of parliament, which reflected the popular will in our system of parliamentary democracy on the subject, they have consciously introduced this 10% additional quota. And that has now been accepted by the Supreme Court on a very thorough analysis of all the arguments advanced on both sides. And therefore, for the moment, I think we should be content with this judgment. By all means, this is not the end of the debate.
Indeed.
As you rightly ask, people may say, well, why 60%, why not 70%, and so forth and so on. At the end of the day, policy decisions of such moment are taken by democratically elected governments based upon their assessment of how the people of a country think on a subject. And therefore, although there is no finality to these things, we are always in a state of progressive evolution. We learn from our mistakes and we move forward. So for the moment, I believe the judgment is valid on all grounds. Whether this will lead to a political debate and will fuel political passions, I can't say at this point of time. But yes, I agree that this is not the end of the debate. The debate will continue.
Not the end of the debate, but does the judgment in any way threaten the idea of caste-based reservation in India? I see a lot of people, including some Congress leaders, making that argument from the side of the SC/ST community, and also the second layer to this entire issue. Does this reservation have any kind of implication on demands for community-based reservation in India? I mean, is there a direct or an indirect way where political ambitions or political necessities may use this judgment as their own tool?
Well, I don't think it is the end. It is the beginning of the end of the caste-based reservations. Given the reality and the social structures of Indian society, I don't think that you can do away with the caste-based reservation. But yes, this is a movement in the direction which treats economically disadvantaged people, irrespective of which caste they belong to, as a part of one class. And to that extent, it is a progressive development. Now, as far as community-based reservations is concerned, it is also a vexed question. We have seen recent judgments of the Supreme Court. In some places, based upon the census, they have agreed to include certain communities as backward communities. Now, that's an altogether different subject. Who is entitled to be considered as the backward community? That's a matter of census. That's a matter of numbers. That's a matter of economic and social criteria. That's a debate which is slightly different from the one we are discussing today. But as I said, there are no final answers to these vexed questions. This is a vexed constitutional and political debate. At the end of the day, let us not forget that in a parliamentary democracy, the will of the majority reflected through their representatives in parliament has to prevail. That is a fundamental principle of parliamentary democracy.
The fundamental principle of parliamentary democracy versus the Supreme Court being the final arbiter of the Indian Constitution. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Always a pleasure to speak to you. That's the question that we take to our guest as well. This is a watershed moment in Indian Constitution. This is a big judgment coming in from the Supreme Court. Is this exclusivist in some way because it excludes certain communities, or this is a move towards a more egalitarian society, as Mr. Ashwini Kumar was really arguing? Let's now get our guest also into this entire discussion. Charu Pragya, who's the spokesperson of the BJP, is joining us on the broadcast. Shakti Yadav, who's the spokesperson of the RJD. Namit Saxena is a lawyer at the Supreme Court of India. And Virag Gupta, who's a constitutional expert, is joining us on the show. Charu, there have been certain critical voices after the Supreme Court judgment. You have parties like RJD and DMK which have criticized today's judgment and said this in some way jeopardizes the entire idea of reservation that was emphasized by our forefathers who drafted this wonderful constitution. What do you have to say to all those critics?
And so I think this is a great step forward, and it is a big victory for Modi ji's vision for economic justice and social equality. Because the way this entire reservation was envisaged, it was to give an opportunity to those people who were left behind because of an economic discrimination and no other reason. If they are capable, if they have the ability to study more, be there for higher education, apply for better jobs, why should they be left behind? Only because of this one consideration. And also the Supreme Court has said something wonderful today. It has said that you cannot treat unequals as equals. And this is basically the fundamental on which they have based their judgment today. So today's judgment does not take away from the benefits given to any other backward class in India. It only adds to it. It only adds another class to it, which is separate, which is independent, and the number of seats are being increased everywhere. So it is a win-win in all ways. I also want to remind everyone that when this bill was introduced in Parliament, it was supported by most opposition parties, including the Congress. So debating it today, trying to find fault with it today, when the Supreme Court has given a stamp of approval to that, is unfair. And this is, like I said, a step forward for India's society.
शक्ति यादव जी, किसी भी समुदाय, किसी भी वर्ग, उनको जो आरक्षण दिया गया है, जो रिजर्वेशन दिया गया है, चाहे SC ST हो या OBC हो, उसको छुआ नहीं गया है। वो जो 50% सीलिंग है इंदिरा सानी की, वो वैसी की वैसी है, और वो जो सारे बेनिफिट्स मिलते रहे हैं इतने सालों से, वो मिलते रहेंगे। सरकार का कहना है कि वी आर क्रिएटिंग अ न्यू क्लास। हम चाहते हैं कि इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शंस को भी, जिनके पास पैसे नहीं है या संसाधन नहीं है, उनको जाति के बेसिस पे नहीं मगर उनकी आर्थिक स्थिति के मद्देनजर किसी ना किसी तरीके की मदद दी जाए। क्या दिक्कत हो सकती है इस आइडिया से? शक्ति यादव जी।
नहीं, हमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं। हमने तो जो पार्लियामेंट के अंदर में जो हमने आपत्तियां दर्ज की थी, वो आपत्ति ये था कि आप किसी को आर्थिक स्थिति पर कमजोर मान करके अगर आप देना चाहते हैं तो उसके मानक क्या हैं। तो मानक होनी चाहिए। जिस मानक की चर्चा हम कर रहे थे उस पर तो कहीं ना कहीं एक तरह से मुहर लगी है। और मैं दूसरी बात ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि एक सीलिंग भी हटी है। अगर मान ली जो पिछड़े हैं आर्थिक रूप से, कई ऐसे वर्ग हैं, कई ऐसे लोग हैं, कई ऐसे समाज में हैं जो अभी भी वंचित हैं, अगर उनको सीलिंग हटने से अगर उनको फायदा मिलता है तो अच्छी बात है। हम तो इस बात के पक्षकार हैं। हम तो सिर्फ ये कहते हैं कि अगर आर्थिक रूप से जो कमजोर है तो उसके एक मानक होने चाहिए। इसलिए तो लगातार हम इस देश के अंदर में जाति आधारित जनगणना की चर्चा कर रहे थे कि एक मानक, एक मैकेनिज्म होनी चाहिए जिसके आधार पर हम यह सुनिश्चित कर सके कि सामाजिक और आर्थिक रूप से कमजोर कौन है, वो किस वर्ग के हैं, किस धर्म के हैं, किस जाति के औरत हैं या मर्द हैं, उसकी एक बार पड़ताल होनी चाहिए। सिर्फ ये कह देने मात्र से कि हम दे रहे हैं। तो आर्थिक रूप से जो कमजोर है उसकी मानक तो तय होनी चाहिए। और मैकेनिज्म कौन सा होगा? तो जाति आधारित जनगणना जिसकी चर्चा मैं कह रहा हूं। न इससे कोई जात है, न पात है, न भेद है, न भाव है। जहां सार्वभौमता की बात होती है, जिसमें कोई भी वर्ग का आदमी जो आर्थिक रूप से बहुत कमजोर है तो अवसर तो मिलना ही चाहिए। ये हमारी ड्यूटी में शामिल है, गवर्नमेंट की ड्यूटी में शामिल है। मेरी आपत्ति थी, उन आपत्तियों पर तो संविधान के पीठ ने मुहर ही लगाई है। और जब सीलिंग हटी है, इंदिरा सहनी की सीलिंग जब हटेगी तो स्वाभाविक तौर पर और अवसर मिलेंगे और हम उसी की चर्चा करते हैं और लगातार उस पर हम बल देने का काम भी कर रहे हैं। हम तो इस बात के पक्षकार रहे हैं।
मुद्दे की आप बात कर रहे हैं, इंदिरा सानी की सीलिंग क्या हट गई है? आई थिंक इस पूरे जजमेंट के बाद सबसे बड़ा मुद्दा यह है कि इंदिरा सानी की जो 50% रेखा थी, जो खींची गई थी, कि आप इसको पार नहीं कर सकते। ऐसे कौन से हालात हैं जिनमें उसको पार किया जा सकता है? एक तो हमें पता है जब सरकार एक नया वर्ग बना दे, यू क्रिएट अ न्यू क्लास एंड दैट्स व्हेन यू कैन गो above the 50% ceiling which has been mandated by the Supreme Court. Namit Saxena, I'm coming to you. Looking at this judgment, what does it tell us about the line, the Lakshman Rekha that Indira Sani judgment had drawn? Do not exceed 50%. But this time the court is saying if there is a new class or a category that has been created with a reasonable nexus, you can breach that ceiling.
See, what the Supreme Court does is, there are two concepts in law. One is a class within a class and second a class apart.
Yeah.
What the Supreme Court in this judgment says is that, that this 10% EWS quota will not breach the 50% quota is one. Second, that 50%, the 50% limit is not inflexible in nature. This is particularly very important. Third, what the Supreme Court says is that only on the basis of economic criteria, you can, give reservation, because this is affirmative action by the government in nature. Also, what Mr. Shakti Yadav pointed out, that there are no parameters of what EWS category would be. This is incorrect. The EWS category is very well defined. It will be, below gross household income collectively, below 8 lakh. You can't have, in notified areas, non-notified areas, particular land in nature. And, all this is very well defined by the legislature. So what the Supreme Court does is that because this is already defined, second, Parliament has the competency to do so. And third, that, that economic criteria can be the basis of doing it. So they have said that this is okay. This does not, alter the basic structure of the Constitution. The basic structure remains as it is. So this is not violative of
Namit,
basic structure.
I'll reiterate the question to you, and I'm just trying to simplify for our viewers, because often the message gets lost in the legal jargons that you and I keep talking about, When it comes to the 50% ceiling, There was a reason that Indira Sani had put in that ceiling, because you do need to have healthy competition in this country outside the, entire premise of SC, ST, OBC or any other privileges that the government wants to accord to certain communities. When you create a new class, and yes, the government has the right to do so, Supreme Court has put a stamp, but where does it stop? Are there really barricades telling the government or any other political establishment that, look, you can create a class, but these are your boundaries? And if it can go to 60%, what stops it from going to 70 or an 80%?
No, that's the issue. It's not going to 60%. One, because the government categorically stated before the court that we are creating. See, EWS quota is at two places. One, education institutions, admission. Second, employment in government or statutory bodies, reservations. What the government stated before the court is that we are creating additional posts and additional seats in colleges. That is to the tune of 2.1 lakhs, for an year. So there is no breach of the SEBC quota and the SCST quota. Second, there is no breach of the 50% ceiling limit. So that is why there is no breach as such of the 50% limit, because they are creating additional posts. And they're creating this is not a class within a class strictly. That is the article.
But Naman, I disagree there, because just now the order copy has come out, and in some places the judgment does read and recognize how you are going beyond 50% if you're creating a special class. I mean, subject to more details churning out of that entire judgment. Viragji, I'm coming to you. Does the Constitution envisage reservation based on the economic status? If reservation was only about representation and not financial upliftment, as understood by Chief Justice, he's retired today, CJI UU Lalit and Justice Ravindra Bhatt, do we really have a constitutional historical basis for reservation based on economic status in this country?
A constitution neither caste based nor economic based. Reservation initiates this thing. And earlier reservation and current reservation both are constitutionally wrong. And there is a paradox in the judgment as well as the government policy. When the government says Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, so this judgment, you are enlarging the scope of judgment, so that policy is violated. And when the judgment says, some judges says that it cannot go for the infinite period. Now para 5 of the judgment speaks about the 4 issues why these new EWS policy violates the basic structure. Now judgment does not clearly answer these query, and as per Article 141 of the Constitution, judgment of the Supreme Court is law of land. So Indira Sani judgment is law of land that was given by the 9 judges bench. Now how can this 5 judges bench can overrule that judgment, because that judgment clearly says that total limit 50% cannot be violated. In any manner, directly or indirectly, this judgment gives endorsement for violation of that limit. That limit is not endorsed in the Constitution, but that was part of a Supreme Court judgment and which is binding on the Supreme Court bench. So sooner or later, Supreme Court will have to form a 11 judges bench. That should be the reservation bench which should handle all the cases, because now 3 issues will be there in implementation of this judgment. The first issue will be there is demand for reservation by the minority communities or those who are converted. Second is what will be the current census, because this Sinha committee has based the report on the basis of 2001 census. So Bihar has taken the initiative, so all India census will be there. And third will be creamy layer, because creamy layer is based on the basis of OBC that layer, and parliamentary committee chairman has recommended that from 8 lakhs it should be increased to 15 lakhs.
I take that argument that this is a government. Charu, I'm coming to you. The Prime Minister on repeated occasion has asserted how we need to build a society which is beyond the caste lines, beyond the caste identities, while recognizing the historical injustices that have been suffered by various communities of this country. When we talk of an egalitarian society or the concept of Antyodaya that I spoke of earlier, this is about creating a society beyond the caste lines, religion lines and welfare for everyone. In that pursuit, is it some kind of irony that a new class of reservation has been created because you wanted to do away in some way with this caste-based society concept and the caste-based reservations? Charu.
I think that could probably be oversimplifying things, because a reservation which helps people to reach a place where they can't reach only because of the economics of their family, because of the wealth or the background that family comes from financially, is something which was needed at a time like this. And if we go back to the time when our constitution was written, directive principles of state policy actually make it very clear. If we were to argue under Article 46 of that, it makes it very clear that when we are trying to do for the upliftment, work for the upliftment of any specific section of society, it is welcome. So here a separate class has been made. It is a very reasonable classification. It is something which is being welcomed by people across all sectors except for a handful of people who need to oppose it politically today. I think this is the simplest form of reservation that can be given. If you look at the population we have in the general category and those of them who are below the poverty line, so families which fall below the poverty line, their children will be offered a fair chance at a very good life at par with others. So let's not oversimplify it by saying that another class has been created or a distinction has been created. I think it is more than that. Also, it is a step forward in the right direction.
शक्ति जी, आई एम कमिंग टू यू, आपके पास आना चाहूंगी। अगर ये 10% EWS कोटा आपकी पार्टी अगर बिहार में लागू करती है या देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों में जब ये लागू होता है, राजनीतिक रूप से बोलें तो ये किस तरह की शक्ल लेगा? आप कह रहे हैं कि कोई बेसिस नहीं है, बहुत सारी ऐसे फैक्टर्स और पैरामीटर्स हैं जो सरकार ने सुप्रीम कोर्ट को बताए थे कि देखिए ये बेसिस है जिसके बेसिस पे हमने डिसाइड किया है कि EWS का रिजर्वेशन दिया जाएगा, इतनी सीटें हम बढ़ाएंगे, ये सुविधाएं हम देंगे। तो सरकार का ये कहना है और सुप्रीम कोर्ट के 3 जजों का ये मानना है कि इनके पास एक रीजनेबल बेसिस है, इनके पास कुछ कारण है इस तरह का रिजर्वेशन क्रिएट करने के। लेकिन जब ये रिजर्वेशन इंप्लीमेंट होगा तो आपके राज्य में भी हजारों लाखों ऐसे बच्चे या युवक युवतियां जो अपनी फाइनेंशियल सिचुएशन की वजह से, आर्थिक परिस्थिति की वजह से कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे थे, नौकरियां नहीं मिल पा रही थी, एडमिशंस नहीं मिल पा रहा था, उनको भी फायदा होगा। तो क्या आपका विरोध सिर्फ राजनीतिक है जैसे कि चारू बोल रही है?
नहीं, मेरा विरोध जो है वाजिब है, और विरोध मेरा ये नहीं है कि कोई EWS से विरोध है। हमने सिर्फ इतना ही कहा कि EWS के मानक को आप जो मान करके भारत की सरकार ने जो अपनी दलीलें सबमिट की है संविधान पीठ के सामने, तो हम तो उस मैकेनिज्म की चर्चा करते हैं जो आधार आपने क्या था, वो आधार क्या है। तो उस आधार पर कोई हमारा जो चाहिए था वो साफ पिक्चर नहीं आया। हमने कहा कि एक मैकेनिज्म होना चाहिए देश के अंदर में जाके हम ये जान सके कि वो शैक्षणिक, आर्थिक और सामाजिक रूप से कमजोर कौन लोग हैं जिनको मिलनी चाहिए। हम किसी के विरोधी नहीं हैं, हम सबको चाहते हैं कि उनको हक मिलनी चाहिए। आर्थिक रूप से कमजोर है, भीख मांगने वाले हैं, एक कमरे में रहने पर मजबूर है, हम जाति को मानक नहीं मान करके हम समग्रता की बात करते हैं, सार्वभौमता की उसमें धमक होनी चाहिए, हम उसकी चर्चा करें। इसलिए मैंने कहा कि जाति आधारित जनगणना को जोड़ देकर के हमने प्रधानमंत्री जी के सामने ये कहा कि इस मानक को आप मानिए और एक ऐसा मैकेनिज्म है जिसमें सच होगा, सिर्फ नौकरियों में अवसर नहीं, एडमिशनों में अवसर नहीं, बल्कि योजना के आकार को तय करने में, वेलफेयर कमिटमेंट को लागू करने में हमको सबसे बड़ी सुविधा होगी। जो नाहक हम अपने योजना के आकार को कहीं इतर और इतर देते हैं, उससे ज्यादा उन पर हम खर्च करेंगे तो हमारा देश जो है आगे बढ़ेगा। यह हमारा एक दलील है, हमारे दलील
का ये फैसला तो आ चुका है, तो बिहार में भी ये लागू होगा आने वाले समय में?
अच्छा, ये बताइए कि संविधान पीठ ने अगर फैसला दी है, 2-3 जज की पीठ ने दी है, 2 ने आपत्ति दर्ज की है, तो जब न्यायिक निर्णय है तो न्यायिक निर्णय का कोई प्रतिकार नहीं होता है। देश में जो संवैधानिक जो ढांचाएं हैं उसका आदर करना कर्तव्य बनता है। लेकिन हमारा जो आपत्ति है, विरोध नहीं, जो आपत्तियां थी वो किसी के विरोध में नहीं थी, बल्कि एक सुझाव के रूप में था कि एक आप आइडियल बनाइए ताकि इस मानक के तहत सबको पता चले कि गरीब कौन है, लाचार कौन है, बेबस कौन है,
और शक्ति जी, सारे संवैधानिक विशेषज्ञ भी ये मानेंगे, और आपकी आपत्ति को भी मैं सही भाव में ले रही हूं कि आरक्षण पर जितनी भी बहस है ये खत्म नहीं हुई है। दिस एंटायर डिबेट अराउंड रिजर्वेशंस इन इंडिया, वेदर दे शुड बी कास्ट बेस्ड और बेस्ड ऑन द फाइनेंशियल और इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस, क्लियरली इज नॉट ओवर. It's a vexed issue which continues to dominate the political discourse, and reservations have always been a political issue in this country. Well, Charu Pragya, Shakti Yadav, Namit Saxena and Virag Gupta, thank you all for joining us on the broadcast. That order copy is out, roughly a 400-page judgment. It will tell us more about the Indra Sani judgment and the implications of it in the times to come. With that, it's a wrap. My colleague Poonam joins you on the other side.
welcome. You're watching the Monday edition of Plain Speak with me, Poonam Burde. Is Canada a breeding ground for anti-India propaganda? Is the Justin Trudeau government turning a blind eye to blatant insult of a democratic sovereign nation which is India? I ask those questions tonight because in a span of 2 months, there have been 2 referendums that were held by a pro-Khalistani organization in Canada, and the government there seems to be turning a blind eye to these. Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, a man who is wanted in India in multiple terror cases, enjoys haven in Canada. He sits on foreign soil, he spews venom against India and pushes forth a false narrative of a separate Khalistan, a dream that he can only harbour till death, only for it to be unrealized. But the onus tonight lies on the Trudeau government to put an end to this campaign against India, a campaign that seems to be running ad nauseum for months together, especially in the last few months. To ensure no Khalistani flags or any anti-India posters crop up, it is the onus, it is the responsibility and the job of the Trudeau government and the local administrations to ensure that does not happen. And it's not because of this one particular instance why we're asking those questions. Let me try and shed some light on what the last few years have looked like in Canada as far as this anti-India propaganda is concerned. Now, as far as 2015 is concerned, there were at least 4 members of Trudeau's cabinet that were linked to Khalistan backers. In 2017, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself attended Toronto Kirtan where there were Khalistani flags. Unfortunately, there was no comment that came to the fore from Trudeau or anybody from his government. That same year, Trudeau again addressed a Khalsa Day parade which had Bindranwale floats. Again, all we heard was silence after that. In 2018, a convicted Khalistani terrorist, Jaspal Atwal, was invited to Trudeau's reception here in India. 2 years later, cut to 2020, what happens? Justin Trudeau comes out and backs farmers' protests here in India that were protesting against the 3 farm legislations. Protests that we do know were at some point hijacked by certain vested interests. Justin Trudeau came out and voiced his opinion about a protest, about a legislation that is only the business of India, a democratic country. That is why we're asking questions of the Canadian government and of Justin Trudeau. Canada is also being accused of double standards. Let me tell you why. Because on one hand, the Canadian government claims that Canada does not support or recognize a so-called Khalistani referendum. But what's the reality? We know